seat night because I know it's warmer, but there is black ice. So thank you so much for coming. And let's see, I have two announcements. First of all, I'm Helen Wilson, one of the vice presidents of the Squirrel Hill Historical Society and your speaker tonight. So I'd like to introduce the board of the Squirrel Hill Historical Society. Betty Connolly is our other vice president, and she is right there. And we have Wayne Bossinger, who's there, and Audrey Glickman, who is working our camera, and Jean Binstock, who's working our information table. And the other members couldn't be here tonight. They're either traveling or in Florida. Lucky people. So the second announcement is that we are right now in the middle of our 2018 membership drive. So we're asking that if you are a member, please consider renewing, and you can renew tonight if you'd like. We have, there's membership forms on your chairs, and there's some back there. And if you would rather take that home, we even are going to provide you with self-addressed envelopes to make it really easy. So they're back there. Then no stamps because, I'm sorry, we don't know how many people will actually send them back. But we hope you do. And if you aren't a member, we ask if you would like to join. It's only $15 a year. And although our meetings are free and open to the public, we do have a monthly newsletter that's usually 8 pages long that has information about our talks, about other historical events, articles of interest to Squirrel Hill history, reports on our research, and any member of the Squirrel Hill Historical Society can submit articles. And if you're a member, our last issue was an article was submitted by James Strutz, and he wrote about his ancestors, the McFarlands, who were located somewhere around Murray Hill Avenue. So any member can contribute, and you get that once a month, and it goes out either by email or by snail mail, whichever you prefer. So anyway, those are my two announcements, and tonight I'm the speaker, and I'm going to be talking about Squirrel Hill then and now. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have to really, let people introduce themselves.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, okay, well, I think, let's see. Last year, some of us from the Squirrel Hill Historical Society worked on a book called Squirrel Hill Neighborhood History. And we had been researching Squirrel Hill for quite a while, but there were things that we found out after the book was published that extended our knowledge of either what we wrote about or things that we had no idea about. So what we did with what I'm doing in this talk is going beyond the book to either enlarge on subjects that we talk about in the book or things that we couldn't fit in the book, which are many. So maybe when we get some energy back, we'll work on a sequel. It takes a lot of work to write a book it was very heavily researched. So, but anyway, and also some things that we had no idea existed in Squirrel Hill. So, without further ado, enjoy Squirrel Hill then and now. Oh, and yeah, thank you. I just wanted to also mention, since we were shorthanded tonight, we had the help of Audrey's son Trevor, and my sons Jesse and Todd to come and help as well, and Drew, so a friend. So thank you very much. Okay. Okay. So this is Forward Avenue looking east in 1908. We're not exactly sure what part of Forward Avenue that is because there's no explanation. But Forward Avenue is very, very long. It comprised part of Commercial. It was part of Pecusset, went down into the Runs. It was somehow joined with Saline through the ages. Squirrel Hill streets have a way of, the old ones have a way of being named and renamed and changed, name changes and things like that. So I'm guessing, I'm not sure, but this is also Forward Avenue looking east. The new Welcome to Squirrel Hill sign, which is just about under the Parkway East overpass into the Squirrel Hill Tunnel. And this is one part of Squirrel Hill that is being looked at by the Squirrel Hill Urban Coalition and other groups to beautify as an entrance to Squirrel Hill. Okay, here's some facts, figures, and perceptions about Squirrel Hill. I did give a talk about Squirrel Hill a few years ago, but I was going to just do a little bit of reviewing to get everybody on the same page. Squirrel Hill's population, according to the 2010 census, was 26,473, which is, that's a lot of people. It's the size of a small town. Not going to read all of these figures, just to point out that the racial makeup of Squirrel Hill is white 79%, Asian 14%, and there's a difference between Squirrel Hill North there at 17%, Squirrel Hill South at 11%, African American 3%, others mixed 4%, and Hispanic Latino is counted on the census not as an ethnic, racial group, but as different from, these all add up to 100%. So Hispanic and Latino people are a mixture of races and ethnic groups. So they're counted separately, but they are noted on the census, and that's 3.5%. That's where Squirrel Hill is located, in the east end of Pittsburgh. And you can see that it is the largest neighborhood. Pittsburgh has 90 neighborhoods, and Squirrel Hill has an area of 3.893 square miles and takes up about 7% of the city's land area. I get asked this a lot, where are the borders of Squirrel Hill? And very quickly, starting up here at 5th Avenue, Shady, to Wilkins, to South Dallas, to Forbes, at the Fern Hollow Bridge, down the Fern Hollow Creek, down 9 Mile Run, along the Monongahela River, and then not up Browns Hill Road right away, but it does a little dog leg here onto this wonderfully named street, Desdemona Avenue, which is actually very tiny. And that's because this area was all one tract of land. So this has ties to Squirrel Hill. At Imogene Road and Browns Hill Road, that's where the border takes up on Browns Hill Road up to the Hazelwood, Beechwood Boulevard, Browns Hill Road intersection, that big intersection at the top of the hill. Believe it or not, it does not follow Beechwood Boulevard, and that's another thing. People think Beechwood is the border, but it does another little dog leg here and goes up Saline as far as it can. The reason is Saline Street once went all the way from here, up along here, here, and then it still exists at some point here. It was all one road. It's been chopped apart for a number of reasons. Down here because of the slag dumps, disappears right about here. Here because of the parkway. So the border follows the southern side of Shenley Park. Then it goes up Junction Hollow Trail to Boundary Street to South Neville. And this was all once Boundary Street. And Boundary Street came up here. Now that's gone because of Central Catholic. But this was all Boundary Street because that was the boundary between Pittsburgh, which ended in Oakland, until 1868, and the part of, well, Squirrel Hill was part of a large township called Peebles Township, which extended all the way from the Monongahela River to the Allegheny River. It was a very big township, but in 1868, Pittsburgh annexed it and divided the area into city wards. But and Boundary Street also went all the way down to Lower Greenfield. And I remember driving out that way. So, but the city fathers decided that that would make a better bike and hike trail. So they closed that off to cars a while ago. So
part of Boundary Street used to be considered part of Oakland.
Boundary Street is the border between Squirrel Hill and Oakland. And here this is not a satellite map. This is a computer-generated topographical map. It was created by an information system specialist. Her name is Lauren Winkler. And she used, in her job, she puts information on maps. But for this map, we asked her to take everything off and just leave us with the topography and the contours of the land. And what you see is that even without the borders, you can still see Squirrel Hill. Here's Fifth Avenue. Point Breeze is a bit of a mystery. It doesn't quite go along with the borders. But once you get here, Fern Hollow, 9 Mile Run, here's the Saline Street ravine that separates the two parts of the hill, and here's the Junction Hollow. So the borders of Squirrel Hill were really decided upon. The latest map was drawn in 2003 for the borders, but we're not exactly sure when the first map was drawn that showed the borders of Squirrel Hill, but 2003 was the latest version of the city maps. Well, let me show you this first. Okay, so the city fathers also decided to separate Squirrel Hill into two parts, Squirrel Hill North, Squirrel Hill South. So where do you draw that line across this large hill? Because indeed it is a hill. You can see it's surrounded by this nice big flat valley. That's Ardmore Boulevard, Wilkinsburg, East Liberty, Shadyside, Oakland. Nice big flat valley. And then you have Squirrel Hill. Two entirely different kinds of topography. So you want to split this big hill into two parts. It's Squirrel Hill North, Squirrel Hill South. Where do you draw the boundary? Well, Saline's too low, and this is Panther Hollow, too steep. Forbes up here is too far north. So if you come across here, draw that lines, what you get is starting at Frew Street to Shenley Drive and then straight across Forbes. So I believe that the division between Squirrel Hill North and Squirrel Hill South isn't as much socioeconomic, which is what a lot of people feel, because consider that Forbes Avenue is the dividing part, and the business district certainly doesn't have a nicer side. So anyway, my guess, my supposition is that the division is geographical. So I've heard people say, no, I live in 15217, that is Squirrel Hill. So that's 15217, and it doesn't bear a big resemblance to the Squirrel Hill borders I showed you. And I also tried to think, well, how do you do the zip code? How does the government, how did they put together the zip codes? So the first number, the 1, is a group of states. So Delaware, New York, and Pennsylvania have 1. Next two numbers are the sectional center facility. Pittsburgh's is 5-2. And the last two numbers are an area of the city. And of course it doesn't correspond to neighborhood boundaries. That would be too easy. So we overlay Squirrel Hill, and what you see is that, and this is general, this is not quite exact, but you see that Duck Hollow has 15217, but it's not in Squirrel Hill. Greenfield, 15217. Part of Point Breeze, 15217, and then you have places like the 15232, the Shadyside zip code that kind of comes up into Squirrel Hill a bit around Chatham. 15213, where Carnegie Mellon is also within the Squirrel Hill boundaries. A little bit of Shenley Park, and here's 15217 coming up around here. So you can use 15217, but it's not exact. And I was interested to see that Wikipedia says it's difficult to convince people they live in a neighborhood different from the place name associated with their zip code. And indeed, I have found that to be true. So Then we have, and Joe, this is something you've talked about, neighborhoods for city living. Was this in 1980? Somewhere in the 1980s? No?
Peggy Smith.
I
think this is 81.
Yeah, it wasn't. It's a paper map.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right. No, I think
Yeah,
it was 1981.
somebody gave it to me a while ago. It's a big paper map where a group of people, the center, Neighborhoods for Living Center, went around and asked people, well, what neighborhood do you think you live in? And the people in this gray area say they lived in Squirrel Hill. And as you can see, if you look at, oh wow, this really got faded out, I'm sorry. Sometimes the projector does funny things with colors. So anyway, this was all the gray area where people both live in Squirrel Hill and think they do. And the pink area, that was where people don't live in Squirrel Hill but think they do. And this area is all pink on my computer screen right here. This is 15217. And let's see, the other place people don't live in Squirrel Hill, this part of Point Breeze, is also on the Neighborhoods for City map where they think they live in Squirrel Hill, but not according to the official map. And along here and here is where people live in Squirrel Hill but don't think they do. So there's a whole bunch of different perceptions about where Squirrel Hill begins and ends. So a little bit about the political and social divisions of Squirrel Hill. This is funny because on my projector that's bright yellow, so you can see the colors are a bit off here. But anyway, the ward system was the first political division of Squirrel Hill after Peoples Township was annexed. These neighborhood divisions didn't exist. It was all the Squirrel Hill district. And you lived on Squirrel Hill. You didn't live in Squirrel Hill because all you had was the ward. And the wards were fairly autonomous at the time. Except, like right here, this part of Squirrel Hill is the only part that's not in the 14th ward. It's in the 15th ward. And
What are you pointing at?
Oh, down here at the bottom, right here, this is the delineation of between the 15th and the 14th ward, but this is Squirrel Hill still, okay? So, that's a really arbitrary division. This is a close-up of it, and what you see is that it doesn't follow any particular roads that exist today. It follows the Celine Street, the old Celine Street that went all the way down to 9 Mile Run, the mouth of 9 Mile Run, and all the way up the hill. If you're coming down Browns Hill Road, Celine Street was on the other side of that little valley as you're coming down. That was a pretty deep ravine. And here you see, can you see this? This is Old Browns Hill Road. If you've ever driven all the way down to the river, it's a long, winding, thin road. You can see by this map that originally that was just a trolley route. The trolleys went down there and then went across the bridge that preceded the Homestead Grays Bridge. But look at this. Okay, so here's Browns Hill Road to here, and the trolley went this way. But in the 1930s, they built this wonderful new bridge, the Homestead Grays Bridge. So in order to build that bridge, they had to remove a huge chunk of hillside. And there's one of the beautifully big stone retaining walls left. They did remove the other one. But whenever I look at that retaining wall, as you're going down towards the Homestead Grays Bridge, I think of how much earth and rock they had to remove to make this long straight road that goes onto that bridge. So that was in the 1930s.
Would that be behind the Wendy's?
Other side, yeah. But Celine Street was on the Wendy's side.
Right.
And it's pretty much gone after that because of the slag dump. And Browns Hill Road is on the other side. Okay, so
Didn't they used to call that the Homestead High Level Bridge?
yes,
Until the
yeah, and
Homestead
before that, the
Grays
Pittsburgh Homestead High Level Bridge. But bridge names sometimes change. And here we have some of the political divisions. District 8, and we don't know who Dan Gilman's replacement will be yet. That'll be decided on March 6th. There's Corey O'Connor, who has District 5. But look at this. Part of District 5 extends up into north of Forbes. So why, I don't know, but it does here and here. So you can't even use the division between Squirrel Hill North and Squirrel Hill South as a guide for your city council districts. There is Allegheny County District 11, and here's Squirrel Hill. And Paul Klein is and we were trying to figure, I'm not sure exactly what his title would be. I was trying to ask a few people, but he would be the county
Councilman.
councilman. Thank you. Okay, and so Squirrel Hill's in District 11. You have the State Senatorial District 43, and there's Jay Costa, and you can see Squirrel Hill North and South right there. And then you have state congressional districts 23 and 34. You want to talk about gerrymandering now. Okay, here's 34. Look at that. Okay, look at 23. That's Dan Frankel and Paul Costa. And this is Squirrel Hill. Split like right down here. And if you look at that area, it's Lilac to Ludwig to Crystal Way, that's an alley, Shady Avenue Extension to Landview, down Luster, along Beechwood, and then kind of through the woods down through Somerset. Really weird division. So here's the 14th United States Congressional District with Mike Doyle, Jr., and Squirrel Hill circled. And again, talk about gerrymandering. And of course, the senators are elected statewide, so I just thought I'd show their pictures. But gerrymandering has been in the news lately. Pennsylvania's map is considered one of the most extreme congressional gerrymanders in the country. And this article points out that even though Pennsylvania sort of splits 50-50 on when they vote, 13 of 18 seats in the United States House of Representatives are held by Republicans. So this is really something that needs to be looked at, and they are looking at it. Pittsburgh Public Schools school board districts, again, don't correspond to any of the other things. The fourth district is Colfax, Linden, and Alderdice, which I've noticed that sometimes Linden is grouped in with the Squirrel Hill schools, and this explains why. And District 5 with Terry Kennedy, Greenfield, Mifflin, and Minadeo. And I also sometimes get the impression that Minadeo is a bit ignored as a Squirrel Hill school, and that's a personal observation. I don't have any official stuff written down about that, but this might gives an idea of why that's how it is. It's in Police Zone 4, Squirrel Hill, and that's a very large zone. And there's an eruv around part of Squirrel Hill and Greenfield, but not all of it, and that is a symbolic wall for Orthodox Jews so that they could carry things and carry babies and children during the Sabbath. But you can see that it covers this part of Squirrel Hill, but not this part. Allegheny County's Beltway system. You've seen these signs. There's one here on Shady and Tilbury around Phillips Avenue. It was a way of getting around the city without having to go into the central business district. And the Blue Belt runs through Squirrel Hill via the Homestead Grace Bridge to Monitor Street to Shady Avenue, and then up into East Liberty. Squirrel Hill's business district. This is another map generated by Lauren Winkler, and it gives, like, again on my computer screen you'd be able to see all of these streets that are not appearing as you're looking at them, but you can see the footprint of the business district. It's about a mile long. Shady and Forbes is here, Forbes and Murray, comes down all the way to Forward and then splits into Forward Avenue, Murray Avenue, and then up towards Alderdice on Forward. So that is the business district today, most of it. But what we've discovered is that there's some evidence that the early developers of Squirrel Hill were projecting Northumberland Street to be the business district. Now imagine a time where, you know, when you go out on if you drive out on the turnpike or you drive out 79 and you see these farms that all of a sudden there's a housing development and the rest is farmland. Well, this is Squirrel Hill in the early 1900s. This was wide open territory, all the valleys were settled. Squirrel Hill was relatively untouched because it was really hard to get to. You either had to walk up, ride a horse, a carriage, trains couldn't go up. It was fairly inaccessible. So Squirrel Hill until the late 1800s was a place of farmland and country estates. So all of a sudden that changed. And here's what changed it. The Trolleys, 1893, Trolleys came to Squirrel Hill, but they did not come up Forbes at first. Forbes had a bridge, which you can barely see back, way back here. This is the first Shenley Bridge here, but this is the first Forbes Avenue Bridge, that's near Craig Street. It couldn't carry the weight of trolleys. So the trolleys had to come down John Kerr Street in Oakland and go across this trestle. You can see a trolley right here, going across this trestle, and then up through the land that would become Carnegie Mellon University, and then up through Shenley Park, what was going to become Shenley Park. So the first trolleys were not coming up Forbes, and you can see here they are coming up what was going to become Northumberland. First it was Homewood Avenue, because indeed it did go all the way to Homewood. It connected with the other part of Homewood Avenue. What happened was Homewood Cemetery got in the way. And then they thought, well, we're going to change the name to Edgerton. Well, I think that wasn't fancy enough for the upscale neighborhood that Squirrel Hill was projected to be, so now it is Northumberland. Wonderful name. So, but here's the trolley route coming up Northumberland and then down Murray. And here's Forbes. So look what's developing. Here's the lots around Solway and Woodmont. That's where the development was happening. It was happening here. This is where developers were buying up these tracts of land and dividing them into housing lots. Not so much here yet around Forbes. So the business district was just starting to develop there. And that's all that developed. The police station, the fire station, and these few stores. But very soon after that, this is the old Forbes Avenue Bridge. And this is before that one even. This one was built in 1899, and this one could not, oh, I'm sorry. Todd, forgive me. My bridge expert is here. The new Forbes Avenue Bridge of 1899 near Craig Street could bear the weight of trolleys. So the route was switched from John Kerr Street and that trestle up to Forbes. And here's a trolley coming from Oakland on the way to Squirrel Hill. And this is a very odd picture. That Cathedral of Learning in the background, that could not possibly be that big. So we think that's a sandwich shot where they put two negatives together, because here's the third Forbes Avenue Bridge, and the Cathedral of Learning is like much smaller. So anyway, this bridge is not nearly as fancy as the previous bridge. So for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to look at specific locations and show you how they changed. So we're going to look at one corner of Forbes and Murray. And here is General John Forbes, who never came to Squirrel Hill. He marched up Penn Avenue. Actually, he was carried because he was very ill. But he captured Fort Duquesne and named Pittsburgh. So a very important historical figure. Mayor Magnus M. Murray was the 4th and 6th mayor of Pittsburgh. He never lived in Squirrel Hill either, but his son did. His son owned an estate called Murray Hill. And Murray Hill Avenue is very, this little dog leg takes you right to Murray Avenue. So we think that there was a point where Pittsburgh was expanding so fast and new roads were being put in all the time, and you had to find names for these roads. And Pittsburgh thought it was a great idea to name these roads after important historical figures. So there was John Forbes, that road goes all the way to town, but all 4 of the first mayors of Pittsburgh have streets named after them somewhere in Pittsburgh, and since James Murray lived on Murray Hill, why not call the main road of Squirrel Hill after his father? So we think that that's the scenario, but there is Mayor Magnus Murray. Most of Squirrel Hill's business district never gets actually torn down. All the buildings usually get repurposed over and over again usually, except for a few, and this is one of the few new buildings in Squirrel Hill. This building has Rite Aid and Modal, IBM, and other businesses. And notice the color. It's red brick with blue and a cream color. It sort of matches a bit the Jewish Community Center over here, which, again, the colors are a bit off. Before that was Black's Gulf Station. I think a lot of us remember that. It was demolished in 2003. Before that, there was an older Gulf Station. And in this picture from 1959, you can see here is the Irene Kaufman Center, which was renamed the Jewish Community Center in 1974. This is the only picture we have of that building. If any of you, in your box of photographs in the attic, if you have a picture of this building, please let us scan it for our collection, because we have not a single other picture of that building. But back to the Gulf Station. That was the world's first express stop station, opened by Gulf. And this was 1935, and this is one of the reasons we are so anxious to get the Squirrel Hill News newspapers online, which is in progress right now, because we have the whole series of them from 1935 to 1970. And there are gems like this in those newspapers, because I've looked through hard copies, but you can go now to Carnegie Library, Main, Pennsylvania room down in Oakland, and you can look through the microfiche. But we wanted them to be searchable, so Pitt's Historic Pittsburgh website is putting these online for us, so all of you can search these wonderful treasure trove of information about Squirrel Hill. So anyway, this is a very Art Deco building, very elegant, and I love this, catering to His Majesty the motorist. The Gulf Refining Company has pioneered the nation's first express stop service station. Its unique service unit, located at Forbes Street and Murray Avenue in Squirrel Hill, is beyond the most imaginative motorist dreams. I love this flowery prose. Anyway, you could buy a car there and you can get it serviced. And indeed, Squirrel Hill did have at least 7 car dealerships. In the first half of the 1900s, the East End, Squirrel Hill District, as it was called, had the highest percentage of automobile ownership in the whole city. Because, again, it was considered to be an upscale, almost a suburban neighborhood, and deliberately so. The developers planned it to be. So that's where you got the car, that's where you had it serviced, and that's why there were so many gas stations eventually in Squirrel Hill, practically on every corner. But before that, this house was, says on the corner of Forbes and Murray. On a plat map, it's not quite on the corner, but it's more where the Jewish Community Center is, so that might have been the front lawn that abutted the corner, because there's no house that shows up right on that corner. So that house would have been located here, but this house is still there. And it is on that plat map. So again, most of the buildings in Squirrel Hill are not torn down. You just have to kind of look up and see what was there before. Some buildings were remodeled, some were even moved, and a storefront put in front of them. So anyway, this house is still there, and as you go down Murray Avenue, you can see more houses that weren't. Wow. This got faded out. So this is a Manor Theater picture in 1937. You can see this side of the street is pretty well developed with stores, but this side, here's houses. It's still residential somewhat, and there's the trolley tracks. Magic words, Squirrel Hill. Look at this. No houses, but the roads are there. Development happened so rapidly once the trolleys came along. It created a feeding frenzy among real estate developers. Came up, bought all these tracts of land, farms, estates, started dividing them up into residential lots. Within the space of 10 years, Squirrel Hill became much more urbanized, and you have something like this. Every man's ambition is to own a home on Squirrel Hill. Every woman's heart beats faster at the mere suggestion that she may possibly live on Squirrel Hill someday. Yeah. So we're going to leave Forbes and Murray and go to one corner of Forbes and Shady. And this poem became an earworm for me. It was given to me in the 1980s, and it's long and flowery, but it's Shady Lane. When Shady Avenue was Shady Lane, before the city fathers changed the name, and cows stood switching flies beneath the trees, and old-time gardens hummed with dusty bees. And it goes on and on about when Shady Lane was a rural, beautiful lane that went up into East Liberty. It's one of the oldest roads in Squirrel Hill. Went all the way, connecting with Saline, it went all the way from the river up to East Liberty. So, but its name was Shady Lane until somewhere between 1882 to 1890 is when the change occurred. But I'm going to talk about this corner right here of Shady and Forbes. First thing is, that's odd. One of our members pointed this out to me and asked, well, where's the missing blocks here? So what's going on is that if you look at a map, Pittsburgh, like any city, wants to use a grid. 1st Street, 2nd Street, 3rd Street, 40th Street, 60th Street, all the way from Pittsburgh downtown, way into East Liberty, you see this grid. So you get Shady Side, which is down in that flat valley, has this nice grid, and at the top of the hill, you also have this relatively good grid. But look at where the 5800 block is here, and the 5800 block is here. Well, when you try to come up Negley Hill, or through Chatham University, or along Murray Hill Avenue, you just can't keep a grid on a steep hillside. It's just impossible. So there was a bit of squeezing going on here. So these blocks, 59, 60, 61, 62, are just non-existent up here. So they just aren't here. So, and this happens some other places in Squirrel Hill, Murray Avenue down towards the bottom, it happens. So it's all because of hillsides. So here's the Forbes and Shady Commons, another new building. It occupies this corner of the intersection of Forbes and Shady. Before that, here is another building we have not a single picture of. So if you have a picture of the Forum, please let us have it to scan. We'll give it back to you. This wasn't right on the corner. But the reason I'm showing this to you, first of all, we don't have a picture of the gas station that was on that corner. Nobody has a picture of that. But the Forum, oh, wow, darn. Oh, shit. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is the part that I decided to revise and change the order of the slides. So I'm sorry I got a little confused. There is a picture of the back of it because that still exists. And you can see, get a little bit of an idea of what the front looked like because it has these roundels to make it look like a classical building. So if you want to get a sense of the Forum, go to the back where the parking lot is. So. But before that, and the reason I showed you the Forum is because this is what was on the corner after the gas station, before the gas station, was Cayman Chevrolet's new home. That was 1949, and it took up not only the corner, but the building where the Forum Theater had been, right here. Because this building's still there. It's that red brick building that is higher than, well, I'll show you what's there now. It's Caldwell Banker, Bagel Factory, Everyday Noodles. So that is the Forum building. That is exactly the Forum building has a new facade and remodeling inside. And it's possible, some people have told me that also is the Cayman Chevrolet's display area or part of it, because the shape of it is almost exactly the same. So anyway, so again, here's a way where some of the building is gone, but the rest of the building is still there and being reused. Before that, this is 1935, Cayman, remember that was the new Cayman Chevrolet. Well, the old one was now where the parking lot behind the buildings were. So here it is. Here's the Atlantic gas station, and here's the Amoco gas station, 2 gas stations. And we do have a picture of that. This is 1935. Here's the Cayman here. Here is the gas station. That's the corner of Forbes and Shady. Yeah. Before that was the Castlemere. Now, we don't know anything about that except we assume that was some kind of an inn. Before that, it was the Beechwood Inn. And before that, there's nothing that says what this is, but same building. But thanks to Wayne, our wonderful researcher, Wayne Bossinger, we found that was the home of the Pittsburgh Country Club. So there's even a drawing of it from 1893.
Wow.
1893, remember, that is the date the Trolleys came to Squirrel Hill. So here the Pittsburgh Country Club moved from downtown to a 6.5-acre site at the corner of Forbes and Shady. This is not the Pittsburgh Golf Club. That's over in Shenley Park. This is the Pittsburgh Country Club, even more exclusive according to what you read. You know, it's like a who's who of important Pittsburghers. Had 26 rooms, 26-room brick building. Now, according to this article, it was the former home of Tony Newell's Roadhouse, which we know nothing about. So it's got a history even before it was the country club. At the time, the country club had 120 members, and they had events like horse races, polo matches, shooting contests, and we have articles about the fox hunts that went down into 9 Mile Run and along Beechwood Boulevard. So anyway, because of the trolleys coming to Squirrel Hill, though, this area became so urbanized that the country club needed a more rural setting. So it moved over to Frick Park, or what was going to become Frick Park, because this is, I'm not sure, when did I say it moved? Wayne, do you remember? Anyway, okay, it moved over to Frick Park. That is the clubhouse. The entrance was down where the Frick Environmental Center is. So if you got off the trolley, or you brought your carriage, and you went on a long, winding, scenic drive all the way to, if you know where the Blue Slide Park is, and you go in back and there's all those beautiful meadows that were once the golf course. It was a 9-hole golf course. Well, in the back of the second huge meadow, there's a high area here, and that's where the country club was located, up here. So this slopes down into a heavily wooded area there, and we found out a little bit more about that after we wrote the book. There was an anti-aircraft battery there in the Cold War. It was actually there. It was built 1952, and it was located on the site of the old Pittsburgh Country Club tennis courts and on the ridge to the east. And I found somebody who was stationed there, and he took some pictures. And these are the ones that were, these are the best views out of the pictures he took. He was a little mad because he wasn't allowed to go and visit his girlfriend in Hazelwood at the time, but he did end up marrying her. But anyway, they lived in tents on the grounds. Today, here's where the tennis courts were. It's now sort of a storage area for the park. There's different stone, like broken stones and stuff. But right here is a slope. And down on that slope is just, there is so much rubble. It just goes on and on and on, the rubble. Bricks, broken concrete, twisted metal, odd things that I don't recognize what they could possibly be. But we think that that is the remains of the anti-aircraft artillery. They did take the guns out, but they probably didn't cart all of this stuff out because it would have been just too much. So it's there, it's still there. Okay, so we're going to go to the other end of the business district now, to Forward and Murray. That's down at the bottom. All of this within Murray, Forward, Shady, and Moorfield, and even a little bit of this, was part of what we're calling the waterfront. Waterfront's in my head. The Watkins development, and I was thinking waterfront because Watkins didn't just, Thomas Watkins, the developer he did other things in Squirrel Hill, but this was his masterwork. And he didn't just build the Moorfield Hotel. He built his own power plant, you know, the smokestack, a number of long-term apartment houses behind the hotel, all of those houses that were in that rectangle. Had a car dealership, which was right here where Lavinia Clubhouse is now, a drugstore with a soda fountain, retail stores, banquet hall, theater, bowling alley, dance hall, and since he wanted to attract an upscale clientele, an indoor 5-story garage, very, very rare for the time. But he was able to attract visiting pro baseball teams to stay here. People like the Marx Brothers stayed here. So they could have their car come to the door of the hotel, and you know, after it had been stored in the garage. So he deliberately set out to create, it's almost like a waterfront type development with housing and stores and a theater.
So at first it was just a hotel, not an apartment?
It was, right. It was they called it an apartment hotel. So you stayed here it is getting built, being built. And that was for more short term. If you were more of a family, you wanted a family setting, or for long term, you would rent one of these apartments in the back. Yeah, and they're all still there. And beneath their aging exteriors, you can still see the bones of these buildings. Watkins spared no expense in building these top of the line, quality building. Now, the power plant. Watkins had two very innovative things in his development. Central heating, but also central refrigeration. All the refrigeration in the kitchens of every one of those buildings came from the power plant. So, this is a picture of the kitchen of one of the Marfield apartments. And then came this fire in 2015, which destroyed, these buildings had originally been part of the Marfield development, Watkins development. And once that was gone, here's the Poli sign, but here is, the power plant was finally exposed. And when they were thinking about developing these sites, not only the Poli site, but the Squirrel Hill Theater site, what was behind that wall? You know, nobody knew. It hadn't been looked at for years. Once they closed the power plant off, because they used different kinds of refrigeration and different kinds of heating, it was just closed up. But what was left? Well, a company called Carta developed a 3D modeling device, handheld, that could look behind walls. Well, there's the power plant. It's still there. So nobody's sure what to do with it. As far as I know, there's no plans to do anything with it. The buildings that are being built can't go into that space because they're... but anyway, there it is. It's amazing. It's like being able to see through walls. It is seeing through walls. So speaking of Polis, yeah, late lamented Polis. Here's a picture that, where's my helper? I don't know what these stores are. One was a soda fountain, I think. Pharmacy? Pharmacy? Okay. Do you know what this was? I'm not sure. So, entrance to the apartment, maybe? Okay. That could be. That could be. But anyway, here's the corner in the 1940s, 1946.
It's getting out of order, they say.
Yeah. And this is what it's going to become. This is the architectural rendering of the Seymour and Corinne Krauss Commons. Jewish Residential Services constructing this multi-purpose building. And this is just on the Poli site. Okay, it has offices, updated location for the Levine Clubhouse, 33 apartments, and scheduled to open in June 2018. I was going to take a picture of it in progress, but I'm sorry, it was just too cold to get out of the car in the last few days. So now a little bit about the Squirrel Hill Theater site. It opened in 1940 and closed in 2010, and I think most of us might have thought, we remember it as kind of run down somewhat. It had been divided into 4 theaters. It was getting, not as nice as it was. Well, it was very nice. It was a Warner Brothers theater, and when it opened, it was the first theater in Pittsburgh to be built expressly for sound projection. Up until then, most theaters that were built for silent films, including the Manor Theater. So, and this article goes on to say that this beautiful theater with the Art Deco lines was a reaction, and it was a more modernized version of a theater instead of those gaudy old movie palaces of the past. And we know they were talking about the Manor, which was indeed one of those gaudy movie houses, like the Benedum and Heinz Hall downtown. It was just as fancy in its day. So this is a architectural rendering of the proposal for that corner. And it has undergone some changes since this one was done. It's real estate developer Herky Pollock and Piper O'Brien Hare Architects. It's a mixed-use retail residential project. Apartments up here, indoor parking, and stores down here. So the architect and the developer are working with the community and with the Squirrel Hill Urban Coalition to tweak this to make it acceptable to the neighborhood, and also to make it part of that Forward Avenue welcome. You know, instead of an eyesore, the old Squirrel Hill Theater, this is going to be to give some pizzazz to that corner. It's a very, very difficult lot because of its shape and its topography. The other end of Squirrel Hill, I was going to take questions at the end, if that's okay. All right. Here's this house. It's down by the riverbank near Homestead Grays Bridge. Here's the railroad tracks. This picture is pre-1903. 23-room house, owned by Captain Sam Brown, incredibly wealthy man. He owned coal mines, coke ovens, banks. He owned a bridge, Brown's Bridge, that preceded the Homestead Grays Bridge. He owned the trolley company that went across the bridge. The bridge collected tolls for vehicles and pedestrians crossing. He owned racehorses, race courses. Kentucky Churchill Downs was one of them. He was, to say the least, rolling in dough. So the railroad decided this is a B&O railroad at the time, wanted to expand the tracks along the riverbank, and this is on the Squirrel Hill side. And the house was in the way, had to be torn down. But Captain Sam said, "You're not tearing my house down. I love this house. It's full of beautiful artwork. There's murals hand-painted on the walls. Let me see what I can do." So he hired the John Eichley Jr. engineering company. They moved this house 183 feet up to the top of that bluff. And every time I go across the Homestead Grays Bridge, I think about this house being moved up that bluff and then rolled back 500 feet. This was an era where a lot of buildings were being moved. They just picked them up and moved them whenever they needed to. But you can see the cribbing. And they used the rock layers of the hill, they're horizontal, to support the cribbing, but it was done by manpower alone. At a foreman's whistle, the men turned winches and jacked the house up inch by inch by inch, and supposedly not a single window pane was broken from this house being lifted. And then 10 years later, it burned. Lost $200,000, which was a huge amount at the time. By then, Sam's nephew, James Ward Jr., was living in the house with his wife. And you can see how much is left of it after the fire. But he rebuilt it. James Ward rebuilt it. And this is the rest of the story, because at first we just thought it burned down and that was it. But he turned it into a showplace. It was featured in handsome Pittsburgh gardens in the Pittsburgh Gazette-Times. And the gardens were amazing to see, beautifully landscaped. So after that, after a while, the house was sold, and I'm not sure if it passed through one or two other owners, but then became the Jewish Home for the Aged. Like many other Jewish organizations, temples, synagogues, the Jewish population was moving to Squirrel Hill, so these organizations followed the people. And they bought the Brown estate, Captain Sam Brown's estate. And here is the mansion, and then here is the facility that was built to expand that house and expand the facilities. This is 1933. Here's an aerial shot, and you can see the mansion and this facility. And here is Old Brown's Bridge. So you get a little, that's the one that Captain Sam Brown built. I have a picture of the interior, and here's another picture of the exterior. And the Jewish Home for the Aged was renamed the Riverview Center for Jewish Seniors. And today, the house is gone. The old buildings are gone because now it's the Jewish Association on Aging and has 4 different facilities on that campus. Return of the Beechwood Boulevard Greenfield Bridge. Indeed, it is Beechwood Boulevard Bridge.
Yay!
Yes, and it's known locally as the Greenfield Bridge, and it's kept its name. So This was a poster that was put out for some public meetings when the bridge was going to be taken down, and they wanted the city wanted community input. So you have the old William Pitt Bridge. Remember I told you about the time that they, well this time it was the Daughters of the American Revolution, wanted to name streets after famous and historic people. So you have William Pitt Bridge in 1911. For about 3 years, Beechwood Boulevard, its name was forcibly changed to William Pitt Boulevard up into about Fifth Avenue, and from Fifth Avenue to Highland Park became Washington Boulevard. So Beechwood Boulevard once ran all the way from Shenley Park to Highland Park. Squirrel Hill didn't like that name change and fought it, so in 1913, the name of William Pitt Boulevard was changed back to Beechwood, but Washington Boulevard's name wasn't changed. So anyway, that was the first bridge, just a really shaky-looking trestle. They just wanted to throw something up very quickly to connect Beechwood Boulevard with Shenley Park. And very soon after, well, not quite very soon, 1910 to 1923, you get this absolutely beautiful, gracious concrete arch bridge. And of course it was sadly left to deteriorate, and the new bridge, forcing it to have to be demolished. And this was the architect's rendering of the new bridge. And at the community meeting they asked the people, well, what color do you think the bridge should be? What color do you want it to be? And guess what they said? Green, because it was Greenfield. So the bridge is green simply because of that community meeting that said, yes, we want a green bridge. This is Greenfield. And there's the bridge coming down. And there is the old bridge. Oh, I thought that was a fire alarm, sorry. Okay, and here is the new bridge. It is not your ordinary girder span like the Veterans Memorial Bridge. They really put some thought into making this what we call a signature bridge. The green arch, they kept the pylons. The ones on the outside are reconstructions, they're made of concrete, but some of them are the original limestone carved pylons. So there's 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, and then one over here. This is a preview of coming attractions. This is our speaker for next month, Dr. Charles McAllister, and he wrote The Point of Pittsburgh. He is a labor historian, a very dynamic speaker, and in this picture he is giving a presentation for the dedication ceremony of the Simon Girty historical marker, which has that was one of the Squirrel Hill Historical Society's projects over the summer to especially, Eric's not here tonight, but Eric March, being one of our members, was the driving force behind getting a marker for Simon Girty. And Simon Girty was a Squirrel Hill resident, but he decided to fight for the British during the Revolutionary War because he thought that they would treat the Native Americans better if they won rather than the Americans. So there are some ethical questions that Dr. McAllister is going to explore next week, dealing with the Injun, that should be in quotes, the Injun Girtys, and he's going to talk about the 2 grants and other questions that arose from, it's sort of like part 2 of this dedication ceremony. And there it is installed. It's installed near Mary S. Brown Church, it's right outside Turner Cemetery, 3424 Beechwood Boulevard. So if you're coming up Browns Hill Road, very next block, there is the historic marker. This is Eric, and of course me, and in the center is Mark Pearson, who is one of the researchers of Turner Cemetery, and another force for Simon Girty's recognition. So, thank you. And I'll take any questions, and we need the lights down. No questions? Wow, yes.
Well, first comment on the Greenfield Bridge, that it was federal money and the federal government had to sign off on everything with the bridge, because Pat Hatcher from the city has some to make the arch black and gold. And they said no, because it'd be too much of a distraction for drivers on the parkway. And so it was actually the federal government that said it was gonna be green.
Well, but they didn't have to be green. It could have been Aztec gold. It could have been black, gray, blue, yellow. Where's my bridge expert? There you are, okay. Todd Wilson wrote Pittsburgh's bridges, so what do you think? Does that sound right?
I mean, it could have been any color that the community wanted, but as far, I don't know, I mean, I can't comment on whether or not black and gold would be allowed or not, I don't,
I could say that Pat Hassett lives in Greenfield.
but right. Right.
So-
But it was certainly, green was certainly a popular choice at the public meeting, but he had also had mentioned something about black and gold as well.
Wow, okay. Yes.
Speaking of the Marvel Apartments, I went by there since I was little, okay? And the apartments, I was told only wealthy people lived there. And they lived there for a long time usually. The other thing was, it had a magnificent lobby, all in marble. And these fancy ladies would sit there, you know, and look out the window, watch people going by and everything. But the lobby was beautiful, it was all marble. And then they eventually closed it up and made, you know, little stores. But it was a beautiful, beautiful lobby. And what was interesting, I had an elderly aunt that eventually lived there when she became widowed. The apartments, the kitchens were really unique, sort of like that one picture you had. In the kitchen were all these little cupboards with little handles. And like people would love to have a kitchen like that now. But as these old people died off, eventually whoever owns it now remodeled the apartments and made those kitchens totally different naturally and raised the price naturally. But the old kitchen, I was just so impressed with it going in there. There were so many cupboards. Like, it was really nice because in those days people did a lot of cooking and you had lots of pots and pans and everything, and there was a place for everything in a cupboard that was closed.
That just is that Thomas Watkins, he wanted everything just perfect in this. He used marble. I know there was some attempt at restoring that lobby, but I don't know where that went. One time I saw that they were working on it maybe to try to bring it back, but I don't think they eventually did. And now it's still pretty fully occupied, but it's
senior students from
well,
the university.
right. There's a lot of students. There's a lot of people with first-time apartments there. So there's always a transition.
Yeah, but it was interesting because you would see those elderly ladies sitting in the lobby dressed really fancy,
You know, I talked about the Squirrel Hill newspaper. You should see the ads. I mean, KDKA broadcast dance programs out of the Moorfield. There were bar mitzvahs, there were weddings, there were. That place was the place to see and be seen. And I have to say, Betty wrote the article about the Moorfield and the Watkins development in our book, the Squirrel Hill, A Neighborhood History. And we can't possibly talk about the Moorfield in even one session here.
The other thing is, besides this lovely kitchen, the rooms were really big. Today, when they build apartments, things are always tiny, not much covered space. But she had a dining room set.
Well, again, it was built to attract an upscale clientele. So there is a lot to the Moorfield, and if you're interested in finding out more, there is some stuff online, and then it's been condensed into Betty's chapter. So if you're interested, the book is back there. You could look at it. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, what's the latest update on the bowling alley? Is that still going to stay there? Or?
I have no idea. Anybody know about forward lanes? The only thing we know about it is that it wasn't there at first with walk-ins. It was when they uncovered after the fire, and they uncovered that other building, it was above the theater, at the Squirrel Hill Theater. So it moved. It moved at some point. We're not sure when.
All by itself.
An entrance from Mayburn that's, I think, boarded up now, I think, because we were looking back there. Christy.
Thank you for such an excellent talk.
Oh, you're welcome.
All those district maps, I mean, there's so much information and so much research you did on those. If those don't end up in a future book, I wonder if you might consider putting them either on the website or in a future newsletter, because those are just wonderful references.
That was something that I decided to do after the book because, especially when the political situation got to be what it was, I was thinking, okay, what... And it also came into play when we were looking at the Simon Gertie marker, because at first we thought that was Dan Frankel's district, and a block away is where that district ends and Jay Costa's district starts. So, that becomes important in the details. So, okay, that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, those are just wonderful resources.
Yes, thank you. I don't know how they're going to change once they roll on the gerrymandering. We'll see, yes.
You might have mentioned with one of the buildings new buildings on, I think, Forward, that it was a mixed-use building.
Yes.
Resident, commercial on the ground floor, then housing.
Yeah.
Going back, the zoning idea was separation of uses. You had housing here, office there, commercial there. They were separate. But in going back further, it was just standard that people lived up above their stores.
Absolutely, and there's a section of on Murray between Hobart and what's the next street down, Douglas, I think, where the houses were actually picked up and moved back so that they could build the storefronts in front of them. So there's always this transition, nowadays there is more of a move towards the stores on the ground floor, and this particular one on Forward, the apartment building, not the Jewish Residential Services one, is also going to have that indoor parking garage between the stores and the apartments.
The economic strength of combining commercial and residential was so much that in the real estate community, in the civic community, a slang word for the commercial and living above it was called the taxpayer. That's a taxpayer house because it was such a boom to the tax base. Then
That's
it
a good
was
point.
gone, zoning that wanted to separate it. Now it's coming back.
Yes, it is, with a vengeance. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm just wondering, this is kind of something from Rick Seaback's things that aren't there anymore. As a kid, I remember a restaurant called the Sirloin.
Yes.
Does anybody remember the Sirloin?
Yes.
Yeah, what can you remember about that? My dad took us there in the early 80s after he and my mom had divorced and he wasn't cooking. He took us to the Sirloin. But basically it was just an old school steakhouse. It was 2 floors.
And before that, it was Bubbles and Sherman.
What was that?
And they had
And
an
that's-
early bird special that everybody went for.
Bubbles and
Yeah.
Sherman, it was a restaurant.
We might do a chapter on the old restaurants in Squirrel Hill because there was Sirloin, there was Weinstein's, there was Pola's, there was, which one?
The coffee shop.
Somebody else just mentioned that earlier. You did,
When
yeah.
did the Sirloin close? Because now it's a men's store.
Not,
It's there in the
well,
early 80s.
the upstairs is some kind of a musical instrument, something or other, according to the sign.
Spiegel.
Well, I remember being there in the 70s, but
At Sirloin.
at Sirloin with my then husband, but I know that we never took you
It
there.
had
but it's
dark
close.
walls, it had,
Yeah, it was a typical
it
steakhouse.
was, yeah.
I saw somebody back, before you, yes.
Bill Snyder ran the
Sirloin, by the way, in
Here's
case
sirloin.
anybody cares.
A little bit of,
Peabody grad. He went to IUP with a friend of mine years ago.
and his name was again?
Bill Snyder. I don't know if he owned it, maybe his dad owned it.
And
That place was
unfortunately-
too classy for me, I didn't do it.
But unfortunately, if that was there after 1970, the Squirrel Hill News ends at 1970, so I don't know if that'll be helpful.
Was that a paper that was put out?
Yes, it was a weekly newspaper, Squirrel Hill News, and we have every copy from
Earl Lipsky.
1935 to 1970. That's going to go online, hopefully in a few months. It's in progress. Yes.
I guess I'm getting old. I don't know if anybody, I never read this. Somebody told me this story, I don't know if it's true or not, you might know, that the Marx Brothers stayed in the Marfield and they were banned because they tore their room apart. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, they ruined the piano.
Whatever they did. it
Yeah, yeah. What's that? I didn't hear about the harp, but I did hear that they had cigarette burns in the beautiful finish of the piano. So yeah, they weren't welcome after that. So anyone else? Two more? Okay.
Once upon a time, the Jewish community was absolutely centered in the lower hill because we weren't permitted to live in most places. That's why the Orthodox cemeteries are way the heck out, because Jews weren't permitted to have a cemetery in the city limit for a long time. And the Jewish community was centered in the lower hill. Has something to do with the IKC Center on Center Avenue, and later it came out to Squirrel Hill.
Yes, but what we've found is not only were the Jews coming from, well, first the German Jews from Allegheny City, then the Jews from the Hill District, but we are also discovering that there was a link between the Homestead Jews coming to Squirrel Hill as well, and that's something we've just begun to research. Littles, for example, came from Homestead, not from the Hill. So I'm going to stop the questions here. I'll be around to talk to. Wayne is a very good person to ask questions to as well. And wait, I just wanted to say one thing. We do have a custom, since there's only a few of us, that if you just pick up your chairs and just bring them over to the entrance where we'll take care of putting them away. But it will help if you just carry them over for us.
I just want to mention one thing.
Okay, one more thing.
I'm not good at making a long story short, but I will. About the book. Whenever we had the meeting a year ago, and it was like my dad's picture got in there on the back cover and on page 99. But Don, I wanted to give credit where credit was due. Don Null worked, N-U-L-L, worked for my dad many years ago. He took the photo. He ended up being a videographer for Channel 2 for many years. And as far as I know, he's still alive. And I guess he's probably in his 90s now, but it wasn't in there because I forgot to mention it to, is it Mike Reed?
Yeah, but you know what? Give us that information.
Yeah,
Write
yeah.
it
Maybe
down,
you could put it
because
online.
If the book goes into another printing, we're going to be making a few
He was an
changes,
amateur
so
photographer then, and he ended up.
we would like to know. We would like to give him credit for sure. So let us,
Absolutely, yeah.
like, maybe even if, and you can also look at his picture on your way out. But do give us his name.
And Joe Scully worked at, if anybody knows Joe Scully, he lives on Dalzell. If you ever want to talk about Forbes and Shady, he's the man to talk to.
Well, you tell him to come here and talk to us, okay?
One time I did, and I'll keep at him.